Here's a little bit more of science on a sphere for you guys. We're talking about the surface of Mars this time. Let's check this out.
Here is our planetary neighbor, Mars, as seen by a NASA satellite. Mars rotates on a tilted axis of about 25 degrees, meaning Mars has seasons, just like the Earth. Other similarities include land features such as canyons, mountains, and polar ice caps. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, you know that it is very deep. It is actually more than 1 mile deep and over 200 miles long. On Mars, notice the long gash in its southern hemisphere. That is the Mariner Valley. It is over 2,500 miles long and 5 miles deep, a canyon that would stretch across the United States. Now, look to the left of the Mariner Valley to see an example of a Mars mountain. That is Olympus Mons, an extinct volcano. It is estimated that Olympus Mons grew to well over 85,000 feet before it stopped erupting. By comparison, Earth's Mount Everest is around 29,000 feet, but it's still growing due to the push of plate tectonic activity. The recent exploration by the NASA Mars rovers seems to support the idea that there was once a great deal of water on the Martian surface. Scientists have long speculated that the lower elevation northern hemisphere once held vast oceans. At the poles, there are still ice caps consisting mainly of frozen water, but they are relatively small compared to the Earth's Antarctic ice cap.
Now that you know a little bit more about Mars, let's get onto the surface of Mars. We've had many robotic pieces of equipment, missions that go onto Mars. We had some that circle around Mars, but we also had a lot of success and a lot of failures as well on Mars. This also gives us a little bit more information about what is the surface of Mars. The atmosphere around there is a certain atmosphere, but let's get into the surface before we get into the atmosphere itself. Now, when we're talking about Mars, what I want to bring up is a couple of different things. The parts that we look at, or the surface, the pictures that we normally get sent back from our rovers, from our landers, from our orbiters, anything that has information that we collect data off of, always sends us back some pretty good images. Some that we can't really explain immediately, but we do have teams of scientists that kind of go in there and look at every little thing on the photos that are being sent back. Now, one thing that I want to talk to you about is that Mars did have a sense of water. It had water a while back when it was a thriving planet, and we want to know more about it. We want to know why the water has either evaporated or it's stuck in the polar caps, or what happened to the water, and is there still life on Mars? One thing that we want to look at is the structures, the surfaces that we have here on Earth, the different types of surfaces. If you think about like the Grand Canyon, if you think about other mountainous areas, we try to compare with what we know. A couple other things that we do is we have some theories out there and some concepts that we can kind of throw out there, and scientists will eliminate some that aren't as stable. But one thing that I want you to know about that is that through the surface of Mars, we had running water before. If you saw in the video that they talked about the valleys and the canyons that they also have, a couple different things that you want to pay attention to is how are those made? Was there lasting water that stayed there and it kind of drained out, or did it disappear, or did it evaporate? A couple of different things. We do have an activity for you to try at home. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit more about the surface. If you look online during, it's the NASA Mars Science Laboratory. It's from our Curiosity rover. It is still an active mission. It's taking tons of pictures, and it's been traveling all around Mars, taking pictures of itself. It takes the pictures of itself to kind of see what's around it. Also, dust storms that come around. How powerful are these dust storms? We are still collecting data on that, but the surface of Mars can tell us a whole different story. It can tell us whether it hasn't been touched or if there is tons of activity there within the atmosphere. One thing is the dust storms are the biggest thing that we can observe on Mars. It also tells us what happens to the surface of Mars, the erosion, the weathering. How does that compare to what we know here on Earth? A couple of different things that we have on Mars is the sand dunes. The sand dunes spread out throughout Mars, and we can see that from the pictures. We compare them to the sand dunes here on planet Earth. So for this activity that we're going to be talking about, I kind of want to look for supplies that you have at home. I know some of us are still stuck at home, and we're trying to figure out some things that you can do at home that won't be too difficult to do. So we do have on our website how we can actually make the surface of a planet or reenact a surface of a planet. So one thing that we want to do is we want to create what the surface of Mars looks like. Now, you can use anything that you can find. You can even go outside and find some soil if that's possible and make a scene or a diorama, if you will, of what this would look like. Now, I know some of you are awesome photographers. Some of you know how to use your cell phone to the extreme that knows every little setting, and some of you not so much. And you just kind of do the regular pictures, and you kind of know how to change a couple things on there, and that's perfectly fine. That is what you're going to need for this project here. On this project, I want you to recreate the surface of Mars, and you can find what these pictures look like on Mars from nasa.gov. Then you can also look for the Curiosity rover that's out there taking the pictures, recent pictures. So I want you to look over some of those pictures and what they look like, and then add those into our comments. I have an example of what it would be. What I have was I went online and found how to make like Play-Doh, like something that you can find at home. It was very simple. All I did was flour, salt, and water. And basically, I recreated some part of Mars that I really, really enjoyed, and where we have rovers, where we have our Curiosity rover. And what I did was I basically let it dry out. And so I have this really cool scene here where it's a part of Mars, and all I have to do is take a picture. And one really cool setting that I like is a black and white setting, because it takes away some of that hue. But if I get closer in, it does look like it's a distant planet. If I can change the colors, things like that, Mars has that red tint to it, that reddish brownish tint from the actual soil on Mars. The oxidation in all the soil that is out there, it goes in with what we would think of rust. So a couple different ideas. I want you to really get creative. You don't have to do the Play-Doh. You don't have to do the soil. You can do anything. It can look futuristic, but tell me or show us what it would look like. Show us what the surface of Mars would look like through your eyes. I will give you a couple of Easter eggs here. If you can find out what Martian blueberries are, I would like for you to repost that on there or show us a picture of what that looks like. A couple other ones is what's one really cool actual photo from Mars that you really enjoyed, or something that you found interesting, or something that you want to know more of, and let us know. Send us a couple questions on there and add that on there. Thank you for joining us today, and see you from the surface of Mars.